I've been with my fiancé for 3 years, 8 months engaged. We've had our ups and downs, but for the most part things have been pretty great, until she moved in 6 months ago. We've been combining our lifestyles and finances, basically easing into merging our lives together. The problem is she's a people pleaser, in her own words. She's been in therapy for 6 years, and I guess I never knew how bad it was until moving in with her. A lot of which she's hidden from me. She recently was promoted into accounts payable at her company and realized she is the lowest paid person on payroll. She didn't negotiate a good starting wage, and has never asked for a raise, or had one, despite multiple promotions. She inherited a car a few months ago and sold it. She had offers online from $18,000 to $25,000. But sold it to the first person who showed up for $10,000. She caught someone stealing her bike at college. The woman stealing the bike managed to convince my fiancé that it was actually her bike and my fiancé just let her take it. Despite the fact that she caught the woman cutting her bike lock. Last spring was my 30th birthday and she ordered a giant chocolate cake for the party. The cake normally comes with nuts, but given my allergy for nuts she ordered it without them. Well, when she went to pick it up and it had nuts on it, she just paid for it and brought it home. I couldn't even be in the same room as the cake. Which brings us to tomorrow. My father recently passed away and I need to fly to the other end of the country to get things sorted out with family, attend the funeral, etc. Meanwhile, we recently had a pipe burst in our home, and the contractors will be out tomorrow to fix it. My flight's at 6 a.m. and my fiancé will have to handle it, including all the negotiations because we don't know the extent of the damages. I've been giving it a lot of thought and I just don't trust my fiancé to handle it. And if I can't trust or rely on her to do something like this, how can we really be life partners? I mean, I trust that she is always looking out for me, and has my best interest at heart, but I can't trust her to get things done. We've talked about it a few times before, but it's been unproductive. She's convinced she's just being nice and doesn't like confrontation, then brings up examples of extremely confrontational people. I think she puts her aversion to conflict above her / our long-term goals, and she needs to find a happy medium. She doesn't understand how negatively this is impacting her life. But at the same time, we've had some amazing years together and she really is a great person. We're compatible in almost every other way. It's a complex situation, but I'll do my best to explain. I have a bio son Leo, 16, from my previous relationship. I married his stepmom, who is a mother of 2 boys, Connor, 20, deceased, and Derek, 12. I've never had the pleasure to meet Connor, who tragically passed away from a motorcycle accident. Derek was so devastated by this loss, and although it's been years, he's still pretty much grieving. I've seen tons of pictures and videos of Connor and made efforts to get to know who he was as a way to share Derek's grief, and be there for him to lend an ear and a comforting shoulder. It's safe to say that Derek and I grew a strong bond in no time. But my son Leo isn't close to Derek. Understandable, because not all siblings and step-siblings are the same. Leo and Derek are different in everything, which isn't a bad thing, but Leo calls himself the brutally honest type, and makes insensitive comments about Derek most of the time. They tend to be under the guise of advice. Derek never complained, so I had to step in and tell Leo to stop being insensitive towards his stepbrother, especially with everything regarding Connor and his memory. Leo would say, "Okay, I get it, and I won't do it again." Days ago, Leo wanted to hang out with friends and asked Derek if he wanted to join. Derek agreed and put on Connor's hoodie before going out. Leo commented on the hoodie and called it ugly and asked him to put on something else, but Derek insisted on wearing it or not go. Leo dropped it. Hours later, Derek came home crying with his hoodie in hand. He said Leo and friends cut it into pieces while he was in the bathroom after they convinced him to take it off. I was furious. I asked Leo and he said it was his friend's idea, then said he had to do it since Derek wears it everywhere, and it looked old and embarrassing. I reminded him who this hoodie belonged to and he said, "So what? Maybe this will help him move on in life." I told him his birthday was cancelled and his friends aren't welcome anymore. He pitched a fit saying his birthday was a right, not a privilege, and I can't cancel it. He had my ex criticize my decision and wanted to host his birthday party, but I refused because he's grounded, so no party anywhere. She and her family called me awful and ridiculous and asked me to think how Leo will hate me for this, but I insisted he needed punishment for putting his stepbrother through this. Almost all the marriages in my family have been arranged marriages. My mom's marriage to my bio dad was an arranged marriage, but it ended up in a messy divorce and him completely abandoning us before I was even born. My mom had a love marriage the second time, despite the disapproval of her family, and has been much happier with my stepdad than she probably would have ever been with my bio dad. Because of this, my mom has always been very adamant that she would not try to force us, my siblings and I, into arranged marriages despite what the rest of our family thought. I've been with my fiancé for 3 years now. We got engaged 2 months ago. He's met my parents and siblings, but as far as the majority of my extended family were concerned, I was single until 2 months ago. Early last year, my fiancé dropped me off home after work one day and my uncle was there. My uncle is the oldest sibling my mom has, so he's seen as the head of the family. He thinks he has a say in what the rest of us do. It was obvious my uncle was pissed, and he ended up grilling my fiancé, and I assume he met his standards. A lot of arranged marriages are about what both families can gain from one another, so he told my mom to get us married quickly. He wanted to make it look like we had an arranged marriage before the rest of our family found out. My mom ignored him and told us to keep dating if it's what we wanted. Over the past year, he's mentioned me getting married to my mom every single time he's spoken to her. Apparently, my uncle assumed just because he'd given the order that we were going to get married soon. He told my cousin, his daughter, that I had agreed to an arranged marriage, and because I had and she was older, she should agree to the match he'd found her. My cousin never mentioned this to me, but she did agree to marry the man my uncle found for her. They got married late last year. They haven't had a good marriage and my cousin is very unhappy. Her husband is incredibly controlling and hardly ever lets her go anywhere without him or a member of his family. Last week, she was over at my house when my fiancé came over to drop some of the clothes I'd left at his place over. When I told my family about my engagement, they all assumed it was an arranged marriage and I didn't bother clarifying because it really isn't anyone's business. You don't tend to do sleepovers if you're having an arranged marriage, so my cousin knew immediately it wasn't what she assumed. She started asking me questions about my relationship and I answered honestly. She got really angry at me and kept demanding to know why I didn't tell her about him. The thing is, I'm very close to this cousin, but I also know how our family is about dating and I didn't want my male cousins trying to strong-arm my fiancé. They've jokingly threatened this before. She pretty much blamed me for her arranged marriage and said she only agreed because she thought I was going to have one too, and if I had told her I had a boyfriend, she would have had the courage to stand up to her family. She hasn't spoken to me since. I do feel bad for her. I know how unhappy she is, but if she had mentioned what my uncle told her earlier, I would have clarified. I don't want this to be the end of our relationship, but I don't know what I can do to fix this. I'm 15 years old. I have a stepsister who is a couple years older than me and she is really seriously disabled. I'm not sure what's wrong with her because no one ever wants to discuss it with me, but she's nonverbal, breaks her bones a lot, and has severe epilepsy and will have many fitting episodes. She also doesn't understand stuff. That's probably the easiest way to put it. She's just a human body with nothing inside. She's my stepmom's daughter. My stepmom married my dad 3 years ago and they dated only for a year before that. I don't know my stepmom very well and I don't really get on with her. We are respectful to each other, but I'm basically living with strangers because she's so busy with her daughter and my dad. I am always on my own and I used to hate it, but I'm used to it now. Ever since they moved in to live with us, life changed drastically for me because all the care now revolves around my stepsister. That's fine, I get it. But both my stepmom and my dad ask me to do things for my stepsister that I don't want to do and I resent doing. Stuff like staying home when I want to go to the mall with my friends. They're disappointed that I don't get her anything for her birthday with my very limited funds, etc. My own mom passed away when I was small, so I can't go and stay anywhere else, and all in all I'm just a lot more angry than I used to be, because they seem really disappointed whenever I say I don't want to do anything for her. Even stuff like feeding her, like, I don't want to sit there feeding her banana pudding and wiping her drool. I didn't ask for this. Anyway, she recently fell a few days ago and had a seizure for 8 minutes. She was taken to hospital and the doctors want to keep her in and look after her. I don't want to go and visit her. I remember seeing my mom in hospital before she died, and I just hate hospitals, and I sort of hate my stepsister, and I just don't want to go and visit someone who doesn't even know I'm there. My stepmom is really upset with me, and so is my dad. They haven't yelled at me or anything, but they are both being super cold towards me because I don't want to visit. My grandma, who lives in Canada, called me about the blue and told me it was okay. And I don't need to force myself to go to the hospital, so I'm assuming my dad has told her I'm refusing to go. He keeps pleading with me, but I keep telling him I'm not doing it. I told him hospitals remind me of mom, and he got even more upset and said my stepsister might die and I need to stop being so selfish towards my stepmom.